What is best in life? Chopping wood, mining for gold, and the total destruction of your enemies. Warcraft, Orcs, and Humans, the granddaddy of all RTS games. Seriously, this game launched the genre in effect. Ride forth from Stormwind to defend Azeroth from the evil greenskin invaders. Or conquer the puny humans with your superior orcish might, killing weak King Lane, the actual canon ending for the record. Warcraft, Orcs, and Humans has it all. Collecting resources, building roads, building buildings, mounted units, ranged units, melee units, even necromancers and these priest wizard looking dudes. Build up your forces until you're ready to ride forth to victory, all the while clicking on them over and over again until they yell it. Stop poking me!
Retro Recall.
Welcome back to Retro Recall, the show with more nostalgia than there is green on an orc.
Nice job. All right, on this episode, we're taking you back in time to the basically original, although not original, RTS, Warcraft, Orcs and Humans.
Orcs and Humans.
Orcs and Humans.
There's a subtitle at the end. Orcs
it is funny that the original game had a subtitle. It was Warcraft, Orcs and Humans, and that wasn't the sequel. Whatever.
Right. Oh, and I know the reason for that, but that's going to be part of my bonus, behind the scenes info that I'm going to sprinkle in as we get through the episode. But it's interesting, but I'm not going to say it yet.
All right. So today we're going to be breaking down the good, the bad, the hilarious of the game, and we'll answer a key question. Is Warcraft, Orcs, and Humans just as fun in 2025 as it was in 1994?
Yeah, like we normally do. And John, why are we talking about Warcraft, Orcs, and Humans this week?
Well, Warcraft, Orcs, and Humans, it's really weird to say that. Let's just call it Warcraft. Warcraft.
Yeah, not to be confused with World of Warcraft.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's pretty clear given our show that people are like, we're doing a show on Retro Recall. I don't think anyone needs to know about World of Warcraft. Like, yeah, we're aware.
Right.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, people still playing. They're still playing that today.
Yeah, I was playing it today. Warcraft really marked a turning point in the video game industry. And as I alluded to a minute ago, it wasn't the first RTS game, but it exploded that genre. Both for Blizzard itself, by the way, and also laying the groundwork for other RTSs. But I'll be honest, today is also really a selfish one. I love tabletop gaming. I run the Warhammer 40k Lorecast. I focus on Warhammer 40k. I've been playing Warhammer 40k. I've played Warhammer. I've played a lot of tabletop gamings. Blizzard with Warcraft, Orcs, and Humans made a real effort to bring tabletop gaming to video games. And they did a great job. This was the first time a video game felt like a tabletop strategy game. And I played the heck out of this as a child. And I'm really, really happy to do it again. For this show, which I didn't need to do, I played over 10 hours of Orcs and Humans. Because I just enjoyed it. I was just
normally we play a few hours, but 10 hours.
I played it I played it for over a week just because I wasn't just honestly, I was having fun. I was like, this is really enjoyable.
Nice. Well, okay. So this is a favorite of mine from growing up as well.
Yeah.
And the game came out in 94, so I was 15 years old. And I remember playing the first one. I think I played the second one more than the first one because that one sticks in my memory better. And they made a lot of improvements, but this one set the groundwork in a lot of ways. And they built off of previous RTSs. They didn't invent the RTS, but they definitely forwarded it and streamlined some of it and then continued with that throughout the second and third iteration and StarCraft and all of that. Yeah. But before we get into all those details, take us back to 1994.
Yes, this is November 15th, 1994. The game is released by Blizzard Entertainment. I assume some of you have heard of that company.
Some of you, yeah.
The story is kind of wild. Blizzard was looking to make a big play into the gaming space. This was only the third game they developed, and the other two were side-scrolling Super Nintendo games. One was called The Death and Return of Superman, which I actually did play. I realized I had to go look it up, and I'm like, I played that. And one was Blackthorn, which I had not played. I had never heard of that in my life, but they did. Yeah. And the developers randomly noticed that there wasn't a lot of real-time strategy games. Effectively none. The last successful one was Dune 2, based off of Dune, obviously by Westwood Studios. who are another kind of major player who will become a major player. These two companies will have some fun competition shortly. But Dune 2 came out in 1992. So 2 years prior to the release of this. Blizzard, by the way, was totally unaware that Westwood was working on Command and Conquer. So the two series kind of kick off not too far apart from each other.
Right.
And the full story on this is that, going to what I was just talking about, Warhammer Fantasy was a tabletop game that a lot of the developers at Blizzard were playing. They liked it, and they wanted to make a strategy game based off that. This will be a fun story for another day, but they went to Games Workshop, who are the makers of Warhammer, and Warhammer 40K, and they asked them, hey, would you share your intellectual property rights with us to make a video game? And they said no. Of note, Blizzard went back years later, did the same thing with StarCraft. And again, Games Workshop said no.
Right, which is, okay, so
I know the story on this one.
Today,
Oof.
right, today you go to Games Workshop and you're like, anybody, and they're like, yeah, go ahead. Because there are like dozens and dozens of Warhammer and 40K, even indie games out there. There's a bunch of them, and they've completely flipped on that. But yeah, back then, I guess they were like, no, we're not doing it. And it also makes sense because Warcraft is Warhammer-like, like medieval fantasy kind of thing. And then 40K is very similar to StarCraft. And look at them and put them next to each other. It's like they just totally just did their own version of
the only reason these are not IP violations is because they, in both situations, they did actually approach Games Workshop, and Games Workshop passed. That's what these are. The opportunity was given there, and Games Workshop passed. I don't know the story on Warcraft. I do know the story on StarCraft. And the story is very simply, Games Workshop didn't think that the video game market was large enough at the time, and that it actually could potentially damage their image.
Yeah.
Oops.
Well, I mean, the 90s was the time period of really bad knockoffs of other IPs movies and things.
It was, but StarCraft.
It makes sense.
Oh,
yeah.
Anyway,
but also, Also, I guess by the time StarCraft, they should have had a little bit more trust in Blizzard. But
it's fine.
By the time of 1994 and the first Warcraft game,
this makes sense.
Was right, like you said, they put out 2 games as Blizzard, and before that, they put out other games under a different name. But none of them were like Warcraft, and none of them were big hits,
and none of them were a hit. Now, I should note, Warcraft sold 100,000 copies in a year, which for a PC game, I mean, we're in 2026 now. 100,000 copies may not sound like a lot, but we're talking in 1994, that's an incredible sales figure. So this spawned an empire, is all I can describe. Blizzard themselves are an empire, but Warcraft is an empire. This is huge.
Yeah. So take us back in time. What else was going on in 1994?
Now, just because we love to do this, we'll dive back because we're a retro show. Let's have some fun with some nostalgia.
Yeah, it's also fun, and I hope our listeners understand this, of trying to get in that mindset of like,
this is what it was like. Yeah, because I'm a couple years younger than Tom. So 1994, I was 13. And this game comes out. I would have gotten this around, because it came out in November. I might have gotten this around Christmas. And so this would have been like my Christmas break was playing this. So we're in an era, this is before MP3s exist. So what you listen to is either on the CDs or cassettes that you own, dear Columbia House, or it's what's on the radio. What you see,
or MTV.
And what you would go and see. It's why we cover the theaters. You would go to a theater to see a movie. There weren't movies on TV, or if there were, they were bad. That's why
they were just like the edited version that would come up on one of the cable stations.
Yeah, they were terrible.
And they had a bunch of stuff edited out with lots of commercials. And by the time you even realized that it was on, you were already halfway through the movie, but you just watched the second half anyway with no context about what happens. That's so weird.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
It's weird. By the way, so November 15th, 1994. Number one song in America is I'll Make Love to You by Boyz II Men.
Oh, this one came up previously, didn't it? Didn't we talk about this already?
It may have. I will be honest, at least this one I've heard of. We've had like 6 in a row where I had no idea what this song was. Yeah. I will say, for me, anytime we do 1994, I get good music, because I've got Korn's debut album comes out a month later. I actually saw them in concert off that album. Bad Religion, Stranger Than Fiction was around the same time. Burn My Eyes by Machine Head. But the coup de grace of this era, and this was actually released, I think, 2 weeks prior to this, Nirvana Unplugged. Which might be the best acoustic album of all time.
Yeah.
It's possibly arguably the best. It is.
I mean,
I'm probably wrong, if I'm being honest, but for our generation. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was the performance that solidified Nirvana not just as really loud grunge rockers, but as like, oh, these are also legitimate musicians.
Yeah. Oh,
because you can take away all the loud drums, you can take away all the heavy distortion, and their songs still hold up. And on top of it, they only played like 1 or 2 songs off of their albums. Most of them were covers and other stuff that nobody had ever really heard them play before, except for maybe a few concerts.
Yeah, it was an amazing album that still actually will come on every now and then on my Spotify, and I'll go, yeah, that's good.
Right.
Now, in the box office, you had Interview with the Vampire, so a cool movie with really good acting. The Santa Claus, which they've remade a lot of times, I discovered when I looked that up.
Right.
Star Trek Generations, that was not good.
Yeah, not so great.
But most importantly, The Professional, also known as Leon. That movie I've seen a lot of times.
I don't know that I've actually seen The Professional.
Oh, it's also known as Leon. Yeah. I mean, we can pause if you want to go watch it.
We'll be back in like an hour and a half.
It would be a good use of your time. That's what I'm saying.
It's have to put it on my list and look it up.
It's excellent.
I remember of it. I just don't. I don't have enough of a memory to be like, okay, I definitely saw it.
Yeah, if we're talking like a retro show for what we are, that's a movie a lot of people would have seen. Yeah, The Professional, magnificent. All right, but anyway, let's get back to the game. So
back to the game.
Anyway, as always, we like to start off with what we found funny about the game, because that's really kind of I think the highest point of enjoyment of these retro games. So, Tom, give me your hilarious.
All right, before I get to hilarious, I've got some fun, crazy facts, because they sneak in like ninjas, even though there's no ninjas in Warcraft.
That's fine.
But there are orcs that teleport through portals, so I guess there's that. Did you know that, and when I say this, you're going to go, oh yeah, no, that totally tracks, that there was no actual formal script for this game. What they did in development was they developed all the levels, all the units, how the units functioned, the maps, your quest line for each of, how you go on a mission and it's like, oh, you got to go take out the village over here or whatever, right? That stuff was set up, but they didn't have any like overarching story or actual script written until the end. Perfect. And on top of it, in order to do all the voice acting, and this is one of my hilarious points, so this is why I'm bringing this up, because I did a little bit of research on it. It sounds like when you hear the voices, and they had actual voiceovers, that was an impressive thing for 1994. But it sounds like the developers just went in a room somewhere and they were just like, okay, you can do a sort of British accent.
In the age of chaos, 2 factions battled for dominance.
And you can do a weird Yoda orc voice.
Black Cat has assigned you to an outpost in the swamps of sorrow. Your task is simple enough that even the war chief feels that you are capable of it.
We'll just go with those. And they stuck him in a little closet, and they basically improvised a lot of the lines, including the shout outs that the orcs make when you click them too many times and that stuff. They just kind of made them up. They didn't write it ahead of time.
Toru Mestro Carga Toru. Your command, Master. What? Stop poking me!
Favorite part of the game. Sorry. Favorite part of the game.
Yep. So it actually sounds like they did that, which adds to some of the, I don't know, appeal of it. But it breaks my brain a little bit, because when we think of Blizzard today, we think of massive company, large scale development, World of Warcraft and, StarCraft and all of these games, right? But
there's a bigger one. Overwatch.
Yeah, Overwatch 2. Yeah, so all of these massive games, big studio, multiple development teams, all of that. But you go back to 1994 and basically there weren't AAA PC developers like we think of them today. They were all functioning kind of like indie developers at the time, right? So even back then, they didn't, now get this, 1994, they were working on multiplayer. They were working on developing a game for like lots of people sitting at computers, but they did not have a LAN network in their office.
Yeah.
They had to put the files on disks and walk over to their coworkers' desks and hand them discs with like art images and stuff like that. This is how this game was developed.
Yeah.
That's just mind-boggling.
This game that's what's so crazy about these games, though, they were hard to make. And the other thing, too, is don't forget, I mean, one thing I want to also point out, CDs were expensive. They had a finite amount that they could put on this thing. And to your point, all this work, all
discs,
these things,
right.
everything that they were doing increased cost.
Right.
Like today, memory has no value.
Right. Yeah. Total amount of disk space. Yeah. Yes.
Cares?
Yeah. Actual memory itself is getting very expensive, but the amount of space on a disk doesn't really matter as much. But yeah, back then it was all like everything's just tied together by shoelaces, basically. And going back, you can kind of feel it. You kind of feel it it's got a little bit of that early PC jank still. Although for its time, it was surprisingly more polished than a lot of the stuff that was out. And it kind of ran better. But getting into some of the hilarious stuff, you've got the voice lines that I mentioned before and little details. These little details came back to me as I was playing it. Like, when you send all your little peons to go to the mine and they go in the mine and then they come back out and then they walk back, but they all go back along the same exact path and they constantly bump into each other, stop walking, figure out how to go around each other, and then continue walking. It's like, it feels like you could just do a path. I don't know. I'm not a developer. I'm not a programmer, but I feel like you could have just
I think that was
made the
intentional.
pathing better.
Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere that they also were influenced by Lemmings. They like that, if I'm not mistaken, another game that sits dear in my heart. If I'm not mistaken, they were also heavily influenced by Lemmings. That was where they got a lot of the
little guys
idea.
walking back and forth and then bumping into thing and then figuring out where to go next.
That's where they got the idea for the mining and the cutting down of the trees and that stuff. It came from Lemmings.
Interesting. Yeah, but like the pathing is just still so
terrible,
so rough.
Yeah.
And they improved that a lot in future games, including there was a debate in the studio as they were developing it to allow people to click more than one unit at a time. The idea of taking and dragging a box over your units, this game invented that for RTSs.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about. The progenesis of RTS here. These guys, everything we do is because of this.
Yeah,
it's
this
amazing.
in Westwood, Blizzard in Westwood, back in '94, like they were the ground, the foundation for all of that. Yeah. But then, the game's just full of all of this wonderful meme stuff. Oh, you've got like the orcs getting angry when you click on them too many times. Leave me alone. Yeah. And you've got even some of the storyline. And this is what's so interesting to me, having been somebody who has played Blizzard games for 3 decades now. Yeah. And every so often I'll jump back into World of Warcraft and be like, oh, what's the new expansion like? What's this place like? And the names and things that show up in this game come back. Like this is, even though they wrote the lore as kind of a last minute thing to do to wrap up the game, a lot of this actually became the foundation for every Warcraft, including World of Warcraft after this. And it goes all the way back to this game. So it's kind of phenomenal. I mean, it's a little hilarious, some of this stuff, but also just kind of mind boggling is my general perspective on it.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. What else did you notice?
I mean, first off, it's the audio. The "stop poking me" that has been in my head for 30 years.
Yes.
Over 30 years now. Over 30 years, that has lived, I'd say rent-free, but that's insulting. I'm happy it's there. If I'm being honest. Like, I wasn't going to charge it rent. It's allowed to stay for free.
It's
exactly.
House guest.
We're good. This game brought humor. That's why I said when I played it for 10 hours, because it was funny. It brought me back to this. I remember playing this the first time I was playing a video game. It's this and Monkey Island, where the first times where I was really started laughing while playing a video game, because most games up until this point were serious, like it or not. I mean, they'd have maybe some cartoony-ish elements, but this is the first one that really kind of was like, hey, let's really just make bits they're just funny for the sake of funny.
Or funny, like it'll change tone. You'll have like the intro video and they're like, it's very important that we do this thing, blah, 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 blah. The fate of the orcs relies on it. And then you go into the map and you just hear this like, what happens if I keep clicking this little orc? And then you get this funny little thing that happens. And it's like,
But even the mission briefings, the thing is, like, on the human mission briefings, they're actually pretty serious. The orc mission briefings, they're talking down to you the whole time. It's actually really funny. You're too much of a runt to handle a real thing.
Right.
So hey,
everyone's an idiot.
Yeah, don't screw this up. It was like, this is funny. Like, you really did have, and that's when I thought about hilarious, that it just game gave me joy as a child. And again, as an adult man child, it's still giving me joy. So go them. I mean, really, that's my thing. But I think we both kind of lined up on the hilarious. Tom, what do you think was just well done about the game? Because actually there's a lot there, obviously.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of points about this. It still feels solid to play. I mean, it's not as refined as later entries.
Yeah.
And I'll get into some of that in the not so good stuff. But for the most part, it is, you can select units, you can select multiple units. The menus are intuitive. You click a thing, you know exactly where to go to build the next thing or to use that unit's power. Everything seems to be right exactly where you would expect it to be, partly because this game defined that and set up those expectations. And so still operating under that.
It is weird when you go back and you play it, you're like, oh, okay, that's where that button is. You're like, oh, that button, I know where that button is because these guys told me where that button should be.
Right.
Like,
right. The dozens of other RTSs I played over
oh, that's weird. Yeah.
Are all just influenced by this and the way that they set up the UI. And so, okay, that makes sense. That's why it's still there. But building things, creating little roads and stuff. And it's not the most efficient building. Again, this stuff gets better, but it works. It functions. The units do what they're supposed to do. The AI could be better, and AI not in modern terms, but just the idea of like when a unit is near an enemy, maybe just attack the enemy.
Yeah.
You don't need permission. They're the bad guy. Go kill them.
Yeah, they would just stand there and watch. Can you just kill that now? That'd be cool.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely, I mean, maybe that goes into the hilarious section, but the graphics were solid for 1994. Mm-hmm. The units don't have a ton of pixels, but screens didn't have that many pixels yet either.
We were on VGA still, weren't we?
Yeah. Yeah. And the pixels are kind of big and chunky, but for the most part, everything was legible. Like you could tell what they were. Yeah. There was no question that was, oh, that's an orc, that's a building, or whatever. That's a tree. Mm-hmm. All of that stuff it makes a lot of sense. They also really nailed the idea of stepping you down into the pool. This idea that like the first mission is build 6 farms and a barracks. That's it. Yeah. That's all you got to do. You just got to learn how to build some stuff. All right. And then the next mission adds something else. And the next mission adds something else. So that by the time you're at the end and you're attacking the kingdom and all of their elementals and you're using, your what are they? Warlocks and their big demon dudes or daemon dudes. They didn't call them demons. They call them daemons.
Daemons. Yeah. That's actually that's a Warhammer thing.
Right. Yeah. It's another one of those things that comes up a lot in fantasy where they're like, well, we can't call it a demon, so we have to call it something else.
The daemons. Yeah.
So Warhammer goes daemon, and like Elder Scrolls goes Daedra, and it's like, they're all demons. They're all basically the same.
We actually, honestly, when I play Warhammer, we pronounce it demon. It's pronounced, it's spelled daemon. We just call it, it's a demon. I can mispronounce a word. Watch this.
Yeah. Right. So, but they did the Nintendo thing of here's a little bit. We'll teach you this little thing. Now use that and be creative with it and beat your enemy or whatever. But then also there really was a narrative thread. Like this did feel like, in the end, even though they last minute cobbled together a story, it was enough. And at the end of the story, there's even hints at like, hey, you beat the campaign, but there's other stuff we're still got to do. We got to figure out what's going on with these portals. So maybe we'll be back later for that.
And that story is canon to this day. Well, one of them, right? The Orc campaign is canon to today. Like,
right. And that's what's fun is that like you play through the Orc campaign and then you play through the human campaign, but you both can't win. Those are contradictory endings. Yeah. One of them has to work and the other just never happened, I guess.
Yeah. And then Warcraft 2 came out and it actually is. It's the Orc ending is the canon ending, which is just cool. Yeah. This is where I have so much respect for Blizzard. I'll be completely honest. I have so much respect for them. I think they do a great job of making games. I'm sure there's people on the internet who will tell me I'm wrong and that they've done a lot of stuff wrong. And they probably have done stuff wrong. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, of course.
But the way that they've kind of stuck to their guns with some of their games, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
What do you think?
All right. So first off, I think game interactions you covered pretty well. Building bases, gathering resources. This is like you said really well. Stuff that's commonplace today. This was the first time you really did it. It was amazing. But the big one for me is tabletop. So their goal was to give you a tabletop feel. And that's what the cap. So it's like you had a population cap you'd get to.
Right.
Once you get to that, now you're playing a tabletop game where you had to build up an army. You had to figure out what pieces you wanted, and you would go forward like, how much ranged combat do I want? How much melee combat do I want? How much mounted combat do I want? Do I want wizards? Do I want necromancers? Do I want this? That was really, that's kind of what put me down the rabbit hole of replaying it. That style, to this day, I still love, because that's what I do. That's something that's one of my favorite hobbies, is tabletop gaming. To see that put into a game was huge. Now, obviously, it's become more commonplace in all the RTSs to this day, but that was massive.
Yeah.
But the biggest piece, and I actually did do this, was the online play. And I remember playing this online. This is huge. We're in an era of AOL Online is just nearing the end.
This is the dial-up era.
We're just getting to the end of dial-up. I was lucky. Yeah. I was living in Philadelphia at the time, and Comcast, before it's what it is today, was a small Philadelphia cable company who actually made their mark on high-speed internet. That was what their plan was. We're going to put a bunch of high-speed internet everywhere.
So you had it before other people?
Oh, I had high-speed internet in maybe 95, 96.
Yeah, I didn't have high-speed internet until I went away to college, and that was like 97, 98.
Yeah, I would have had it right about this era, but it's only because the guy who owned Comcast, that was his, and he was correct. That was his big play. I'm going to beat all my competition because I'll just have faster internet than all of them, which worked, by the way. But anyway, this game you could play online. So Orcs and Humans allowed you to play with a friend or a not friend if you wanted to in an online game. This is incredible. Like this just didn't happen before. Now all of a sudden,
and Doom and Quake, were some of the first like, holy crap, I can connect to somebody else and play this with them. Yeah.
And for those people listening to us who are fans of Warhammer and whatnot, I want to point out this is 1994. It will be 22 years before Warhammer Total War is released. So it is Warcraft, and then 22 years later, Total War. Obviously, Warcraft 2 is playable online, so is Warcraft 3. But this becomes this whole thing. And this also launches a whole thing. Obviously, StarCraft is, I think, better known for online play and competitive play.
It became the big, massive international success. That built off of all the lessons they learned off of these first
This is where we're talking about. This is why this game is so fascinating to me. Because, Tom, you alluded to it really well earlier. It's not just that they did these things. They did them pretty well, because that's actually the secret. When we talk about being like, it's not that you're necessarily the first to do something. You're the first to do it well enough that people liked it. That's what this is.
People use yours as a foundation for their designs.
Now all of a sudden, hey, there's proof that this works. Now we have to make online games. Now I have my own personal opinions on some of the MMOs that came out much later into the early zeros, where it was like, everything has to be an MMO, guys. But I digress.
Warcraft's huge. I guess we all need to cash in, and it's like, no, you don't.
Stupid Final Fantasy 11? Anyway, I digress. I digress. But let's get into, unfortunately, there's some bad.
Before we get to the bad, you mentioned the online stuff. I've got another fun fact about this.
Please,
remember, they didn't really have a LAN network in their office. So when they started working on the multiplayer components, things did not go so smoothly.
Oh, no.
Okay, so you remember when you had dial-ups, and I remember this from playing Quake, and the amount of lag and delay that was like, you would see somebody at the distance, but by the time you shot your rocket, they'd be on the complete other side of the room, like that kind of stuff. Well, they discovered this in real time in development, because there's a story about the first time they got it up and running and tested it out. This is the first successful test of their multiplayer. They had the technical paradox of completing the match. And the match was between lead programmer Patrick Wyatt and designer Ron Miller, who were the two. They were at their PCs playing against each other, right? And at the end of the game, they both stood up and were like, ha, I won.
Oh no.
The game had desynced so badly that they played it basically an impossible match against the other person because both of their systems were not updating accurately enough. And by the end of that match, they believed each of them won because on their own PCs, that's what it looked like. But there was that much desyncing. And and we think today, like sometimes we're like, oh, it's lagging. I could have landed that sniper shot or whatever. But it was, all of a sudden it jumped to 200 milliseconds instead of 60 milliseconds worth of ping.
These guys played for 20 minutes.
They finished an entire match and thought they won the game. It wasn't just like a headshot that was misreported.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how janky that stuff was. And
1994. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I still had dial-up for sure. And
Yeah.
that stuff that was laggy. It was so bad. Like anybody who didn't grow up with dial-up has no idea. It's almost like the difference between sending somebody Morse code and actually picking up the phone and talking to them. That's technologically the jump between that and broadband.
It is why I'll get in trouble if I go too far into things we did on dial-up. But yeah, let's just say it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best.
Was not the best.
It was not the best. All right, but
yes,
Warcraft wise, some things were bad. Or let's just go with less good. So go ahead, Tom. What do you got?
Yeah, well, although this feels like a really solid first try, they clearly refined the mechanics and the balance and even just a lot of the little details in later games. But things like I mentioned, the pathing before is a little rough. You can take a squad, like a group, and click somewhere on the map, and they will all just they'll spread out and figure out different ways to go from one place to another. It's not designed to really do that. The fog of war extends 2 squares out from your units, which is kind of ridiculous. That's like if you were constantly walking around in a fog where you can only see 10 feet in front of you. That's a little rough. And this is why I bring this one up. The first time I loaded up the Orc campaign and I failed the first mission.
Yeah, I did too.
Right.
I did
now,
too.
why did I fail the first mission? Because I could not see ahead of where my little scout unit was going on the map to know that I was going to aggro 2 soldiers who were then going to follow me. Once they're aggroed, they just kill your guys and then they just go attack your farms or whatever.
Yep.
And you've got another little dude or 2 to fight back. And if you accidentally aggro another group, you're done because you can't build any more units yet.
I had to fail it, then go hunt those guys down the next mission. Yep. That's on my next attempt. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, the fog of war, absolutely, that is a problem. Like that, they clearly extended that out further in later games, and RTSs don't. Like they still have fog of war, but you at least get a nice radius where you can kind of tell where things are. In fact, one of the later matches I couldn't find the other mine. You run out of that first mine, and I was like, I think it's along a road somewhere, but I can't seem to find it until I would basically beaten the match anyway. And then I was like, oh, that's where the other mine is. Little things like that are just like, that's a little rough. The controlling the units also was a little janky.
Yeah.
Like it's very difficult to keep your archers, for example, behind your soldiers, like your melee units, your knights or whatever they're called. Like they'll often kind of wander in front of each other or move around. Or like we said earlier, that some of them will just stand there. Even when you click to attack the enemy, it's like, oh, these 3 guys are attacking, so I don't need to do anything. And it's like, and having played games later, like I think our concept of being efficient is changed. When you play StarCraft, you absolutely want every unit possible attacking the thing that you're clicking on.
Hotkeying and
at all times.
Rocketing. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But in this game, it's not designed like that. It's like you said, it's designed more like a tabletop where it's like, okay, this was the unit that was closest, so he's the one doing the attacking. And if you want more than that, you got to specifically click units and tell them to stand next to the guy and attack the thing. So that part's a little bit funny. Also, units don't really heal except for when you have magic spells that heal them.
Yeah.
But like you would think they could go back to the barracks and just stand next to the barracks and maybe get a hot meal and
to be fair,
massage.
no, because Blizzard hadn't thought of that yet.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's what's wild.
Right.
You're right, because we've played RTSs for so long.
Right.
But
Right.
Blizzard or Westwood, whoever thought of it first, hadn't thought of that concept yet. So no
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah, my little orc warrior's got like one little sliver of health, and I'm like, he's not even useful anymore. What do I even do with him? Until eventually you unlock the ability to heal things, and then you have to functionally use that.
Yep.
And it becomes another thing you have to
It's not
actively
passive,
click
it's
on
active. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And little things like that were ironed out later. But for this one, they definitely stand out in retrospect as like why isn't this here? But it's just because we've become so comfortable with all the advancements.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. It's hard. I don't like hitting a game with hindsight, but our goal here is to cover if the game is still fun, if it's worth going back and playing again, so we kind of have to. The user face is rough. You really can't right-click on and move things the way you would expect to. And to your point, it's all the things that we've come to expect in RTSs. I mean, decades of playing these things, 3 decades of playing them. There's certain styles I expect, and I just can't. So it throws you off. Also, the game's pretty simple in comparison. You have 1 melee troop, 1 range troop, 1 fast attack, and 1 caster. There's no defenses, you have no walls, you have no towers. It's very, very bare bones. It's fun. In fact, in addition to the 10 hours of this game I played, I dove into Warcraft 2 for a little bit just to be like, hey, when did it get better? I will admit, Warcraft 2 is a massive jump off of Warcraft
it's huge.
1. Like, astronomic.
And
Warcraft,
you got boats?
Yeah, you have boats, you have dwarves. It really, they went big. Warcraft 2 is candidly out of the entire franchise. For me, I think Warcraft 2 is the best.
I thought that was my sweet spot because once we got the hero units in Warcraft 3, it felt like the fiddliness of this one got kind of like ironed out in the second one because you could group units more easily and that worked out really well. And then 3 came out and it was like, okay, now I got to manage my hero unit and these groups.
Yeah.
And like that, it just became too many things in my experience.
3's a great storyline. Great storyline, great game. But
the art and stuff improved for sure. Again, and all of that stuff got better.
I'm going to reference Warhammer. You call it Hero Hammer. Comes up in Warhammer a lot where all of a sudden Games Workshop makes the heroes really good. So then everyone just plays the heroes and comes Hero Hammer. That's what Warcraft 3 kind of was. Here's your main character and you build stuff around using your main character to go defeat things. But I think Warcraft 2 was a sweet spot with the towers and all that stuff. So yeah, I don't have a lot of negatives on it, but it was just the negatives are more, it's just almost too old to play in some regards, which I think brings us.
It is a little, I don't know what the right word is. Chunky?
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. It's just a clunky, probably more than
clunky. Yeah, it's clunky. A little but that's part of the nostalgia though, is that like, oh yeah, these units go in these squares. And when they walk through the squares, they only walk through them at certain angles, Yeah. It's, and we talked about this with some of the old NES games. There's something about the geometry of these, like they're toys, like they're Lego pieces or something like that. And there's something that just hit me as a kid as this really appealing aesthetic of basic shapes.
Yeah, I like that. I like that assessment because again, for me, playing the game, I thought it was fun. Well, actually, let's get into that. Let's get into the verdict because I think the two real questions is, I mean, I enjoyed playing the game, but did you? Was it still fun? But also, did it take you back to sitting in what was a computer chair back in the 90s, which was probably leather and not that well maintained?
Or faux leather.
Yeah, or faux leather. And, with your VGA monitor. I mean, we were probably looking at what, 12-inch?
Oh, yeah.
18-inch monitor?
I don't remember the exact size, but it was small. Yes.
Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think that?
This one definitely brought me back. So this, like, the nostalgia is there. Absolutely. It brought me back. It was fun to play this again because of the nostalgia. Would I keep playing it? It seems like, again, we kind of get into this. You have a different bar than I do.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm down for 10 hours. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to play enough to have enough of an experience and to talk about it. But if you were to say like, hey, Tom, pick an RTS, you got to play one tomorrow, probably not picking Warcraft 1.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean,
I'm probably picking, I'll probably go back to 2. It might be fun to try 3 and maybe I'll get a different perspective on the heroes.
I'll play StarCraft 1. I'll tell you straight up right now. I'm playing StarCraft 1 or Red Alert.
Right. Both of those. And maybe that's, some of it's because I just also haven't played a lot of those games in a long time. It'd be kind of fun to try them out again. But this one, so on the remaster version, I would go between the old graphics and the new graphics. And one of the things that you could do in the options is actually change the speed that the game played at. I pushed it up to fastest pretty quickly. Did you change the speed of the game at all?
Nope.
So you just played it regularly, and it only goes a little bit faster. So it's not like it doubles the speed, but even at fastest, there were moments where I was like, it feels slow. It feels like I'm kind of spending a lot of time waiting for something to happen so that I can build the next building.
Yeah.
Or have enough units to send my attack over.
So 2 things. 1, there's also console commands, Tom.
So, but that's the other thing between you and me is that I'm the one who's like, I'm just going to play it the way it's meant to be played by the designers. And you're like, no, I'm cheating the heck out of this.
Oh, yeah.
As much fun as possible.
Some of those levels, I was like, nah, you know what I want to do? I want to have all of the orcs. Let's just see, because that's what I mess around in games a lot.
That's true. But you know what? I used to do more of that as a teen too. Like I probably got to a certain part and I was just like, okay, this feels slow. Let me just break the game.
Oh yeah. Like, if I want a challenge, like the truth is it's why I did 10 hours, because I would go through and I beat the level for real. I'd farm all my gold and all my wood and I'd build my units and do it. And then I'd go through a second time going like, all right, let's just see what else was there. Hit enter, and I can't even think of some of the codes off the top of my head, but all right, looks like I have all of the wood and gold. All right,
now just build all the things.
I have everything. Yeah. But
12 barracks. Yeah. So for me, that's I'm guessing for you, it absolutely does hold up. You're like positives all the way.
I was very happy. Very happy playing this again.
I'm glad we played it. Let me say that. I'm glad we played it. I think it's the matter of, it's decades later. There's lots of other stuff going on. I'm not sure it's going to grab my time to go back more. I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So here we are at the end of the show, and just an update for people on a few things that have changed recently. First of all, if you were checking out the video version of the show, we've decided to double down on the audio version because that seems to do better for the show in particular. And on top of that means that you probably have noticed that we've been doing weekly episodes. So this is where we are. If you're looking for the video version, it's not around anymore. So hang out with us here. And of course, come join us on the Discord and talk to us about your fun memories and all of that. And we're always happy to talk with people who join in and pop in, have some of their own experiences to share and all of that. But also, you might have noticed that we are not doing the challenge part either where we play a terrible game at the end. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to play terrible games, but I think what we're going to end up doing is kind of like Battletoads. We're going to sometimes talk for an entire episode about something that was terrible and get a little bit more deep into it rather than sprinkling in something at the end of the episode that's something nobody's ever heard of. So we're just trying out different stuff, Yeah.
That's the truth is, because some of those challenges, those games should just be lost to history, candidly. And so
yes,
maybe we'll do an episode. We'll do like 3 or 4 of them back to back. We would probably do an episode where it's like, hey, here's 10 minutes on why you should never in a million years play RoboCop.
Right. Or if our listeners chime in with, "Hey guys, I'd really love to have your experience about this terrible game." Yeah. Maybe we'll set some of those episodes up in the future. But now that that's all out of the way, where are we going next week?
So next week we're going to go fast, really, really fast, Super Nintendo fast. We're going F-Zero, one of the first kind of racing games I can remember playing, if I'm being honest, outside of obviously the Olympics game with the Nintendo pad.
Right. Oh my gosh. I remember my friend John, who lived across the street from me, had one of those, and we'd go over and we'd spend most of the time just on the floor pounding it with a fist.
You would either sit in the floor or you'd sit in a chair. Those were the only 2 ways anyone played that game. It did not achieve its goal. But so F-Zero, Super Nintendo game, really, actually, I wouldn't say ahead of its time because it wasn't, but it really did set forth some of the racing genre a little bit differently for home console.
Yeah. And it felt fast. It was a fast game.
It was a fast game, fast racing game. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm going to do some more research before I say it's a precursor to Mario Kart, but I do think it probably had an effect.
Tech-wise, probably a lot of that same, like the Super Nintendo ability to to take 2D things and make them work almost like a 3D plane at a distance. Like some of that tech, I bet, worked its way into Mario Kart.
Oh, very much so. But
we'll find out.
This will be fun. F-Zero will be great. So that'll be us next week, everybody.
Yeah. And thanks for being here. Make sure if you want to help us out, comment and subscribe and come back and listen to us. Share it with your friends. Join us on the Discord. And if you like us, check out our other stuff. John does the 40K Lorecast and the history of 40K. I've been talking in the Fallout Lorecast about the TV show and all that stuff, the Elder Scrolls Lorecast and the Lord of the Rings Lorecast. We finally started the Fellowship of the Ring after 3.5 years of doing
Good job.
lore. That's crazy, right? we went through the Silmarillion and the Hobbit and all of that. It took us a year and a half to get through the Hobbit. Some episodes we would talk about 3 pages at a time. So we did extremely close readings, and now we're talking about the Fellowship of the Ring. So go listen to our other stuff.
It's a good book, if I'm being honest. So.
Oh yeah, no, by like one of the most amazing authors who's ever lived. Yeah, right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Fair enough.
So do we have an outro? Do we have like a until next time?
Yeah. See you guys next week.
Until next time, drive real fast and stop touching me.
Yeah. See you guys next week. Take care.
Recall.
Robots Radio. Games. Lore. Stories. Community. Just press play.